Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining this webinar. Thanks for joining us. We're here today with Jay Steinfeld and Philip Odefelt. Gentlemen, really excited for this conversation. We'll let the both of you introduce yourself.
Philip?
Yeah, sure. Philip Odefelt, co-founder and CEO of Datavations. Been working in the home improvement building material space over the past 7 years or so. And we help brands figure out the right product and the right price with data analytics. And I'm excited to be here with you today, Jay. You're my best mentor, and you've been an amazing contribution to Datavations, but also the broader market. And I'm excited for our audience today to get to hear more from you.
Well, thank you for asking me to be here, Philip. I appreciate it. My background is CPA, so I wanted to go into business and felt like financial information would be helpful. At least that's what the data showed for the people who were successful. They said you had to know the numbers, know financial statements. So I don't like accounting. I've never liked accounting, but I did it as a means to an end. And it worked out because I was able to start blinds.com, basically from my garage, and build it into the #1 online retailer of blinds in the world, and then sold it to Home Depot a few years later.
I love that. Yeah, so I think that the conversation today is going to be a fruitful one. But to start, I would like to learn more about your journey with blinds.com, which you eventually sold to Home Depot.
Well, it wasn't like I had done a market opportunity study of the blinds market. I had been fired from my CPA job, and I needed something to do. My wife, Naomi, was in the blinds business. She had a little store. And I thought, okay, CPA, perfect segue to go into the blinds industry. So I did, and learned all about it. And started a second store. So we had 2 stores. It started in 1987. And then about 6 years later, I heard about something called the Information Superhighway, and didn't know what that was, didn't know what email was. Really, nobody did. This was in 1993, the year before Amazon started. Google hadn't started, really nothing had started. So it was purely an experiment to try to apply the internet to my blinds company, because I was really getting killed from the top and from the bottom. I was squeezed. The designers were selling to the high end, and the price sensitive do-it-yourself was being serviced by mail order companies, and companies like Sears, Montgomery Wards, and Penny's were 3 top retailers. And we were in the middle, and being in the middle in retail is no man's land. That's disaster. So I had to figure out, what do I do? And I had very little money. So I had to figure out a way to get distribution without money. And the internet seemed to be something that I could do. Amazon was now selling books, just books, and thought, well, if you can sell stuff online, I'm going to give it a shot. So it was really just a marketing experiment based on the data. That's something I should try. And I'm all about experimentation without fear of failure, and trying to evolve continuously my 2 core concepts. And that's what I did. And we just stayed at it, studied the numbers, and built it from nothing to something.
That's fascinating. Yeah, one thing that I didn't realize about your story that really caught my attention is the association of where you sat in the good, better, best analysis, right? And you said you were the mid-price point to start. How did blinds come to evolve its pricing strategy associated with being OPP versus high price point versus that mid-price point?
Well, there were when you have a lot of SKUs or products, all of our products were custom made. And there are some that are draperies, which are more on the higher end, which are much harder to price shop. And it requires design expertise, color expertise. And it's much harder to compete there on price. So you could stay with your higher margins because you were higher touch. So you had to have higher margins to stay. Then you had the blinds, which are basically measure it, install it, and they're almost a commodity, fungible. So you had to be more price sensitive on that. So your margins were smaller there, bigger on the draperies. So what I did was I applied my common sense, really, to sell only blinds through the internet, because I knew those were more price sensitive, and that's where I was getting killed.
That's fascinating. I'm sure that was a pretty hard journey to be on, a lot of analytical firepower. How did you leverage data to ultimately enable blinds.com to eventually become a multi-billion-dollar enterprise?
Well, we never considered ourselves as a blinds company. We didn't consider ourselves as an, quote, internet company. We were considering ourselves as a direct marketing company. And that happened to be selling blinds, at least blinds at first. And I'll get into that later if you like. But the idea was, we, as a direct marketing company, had to look at everything we did and measure it. Customer acquisition costs primarily, navigation, close rates, AOV, everything that we did had to be tested. And we had a whole team that did nothing but test. And testing was so important to us that we demonstrated by having 2 giant test tubes in the office. These are 6 foot tall, 1.5 foot wide glass test tubes, which we had custom made. And in one test tube were all the were marbles. And it was filled up with all the marbles because these were the experiments that did not work. In the other test tube were all these marbles, but were only filled up about 10%, 20% of the way. And those are the experiments that did work. And we had those signs: experiments that worked, experiments that didn't work. So everybody who came in saw that and saw how we were proud of all the experiments that did not work, because we knew that. And we didn't spend a lot of time on things that weren't working. It seemed so obvious. Understand what's working and do more of it, and then leverage it and just put more money into it. If it's not working, tweak it or stop doing it. And that seems so common sense, but it's so crazy how people don't do it, because either they're afraid of seeing the results, they don't want to report it to the CEO because they're afraid they may lose their job, or they just don't know how to do it. So we did. We learned how to do it, but it was early. The data that we had was pretty primitive, and if we were doing it now, it would have been a lot easier. But also, maybe it would have been harder because everybody else would have had some of these tools. And the ones that are not using the tools certainly are not going to grow or scale as well as somebody who's watching everything. And that's what we were so good at, is watching everything and never being satisfied. What we also wanted to do is make sure that we understood what wasn't working that we didn't know about. So we were trying to get data from manufacturers. We were trying to get data from really everybody we spoke to. How is that competitor doing? What's working? What's not working? What are they selling? Are there certain embellishments on that product that are selling that we're not selling? Special lifting mechanisms that help you raise a shade. Remote controls. What percentage of products are remote control? What percentage of our products are remote control? If we had a big delta, we knew that we were losing money. So I just wish we had some of those tools when we started, but maybe, as I said, if everybody had them, it would have been harder to compete because more people had the tools that were generally available. Being early was a big help. It was kind of the lucky part of our growth, because people thought I was crazy being in the blinds business. People didn't think there was money to be made in the blinds business. So all the big money just stayed away for a while, and that gave me some chance to breathe, and I didn't have to go as fast as I have to go right now. Now it would just be furious experimentation. Then it was just fast.
That's fascinating. Yeah, being a pioneer within e-commerce and really having the mission to own a category is fascinating. Yeah, so you just brought up a bunch of really interesting points on understanding, for example, attachment rates in your orders associated with having remotes and other characteristics of the assortment that you had. What are some modern tools that are available today that, if you had them back then, would have enabled you to make better and faster decisions and put more of those green pebbles in the jar?
Well, since we had no technology to be able to get competitor information, we had to just resort to asking our manufacturers and asking other manufacturers, hey, how well is Bruce doing? How well is Carl doing? And hopefully we were getting some information. And this one then, of course, is looking in the rearview mirror when it's almost too late at that point. But being online and not having, we had no inventory, which is a blessing. So we were, because all our products were custom made and drop shipped, we were able to adjust pretty fast. And we needed to adjust quickly on price, on what we were merchandising, even the way we merchandise. If we weren't selling it, going back to that example about the remote control, enough percentage remote controls with orders, maybe that had to do with our price, maybe that had to do with somebody else's price, a sale they were having, or how we were merchandising it. Maybe we just really were bad at showing what the benefits were. But we knew that there was an issue, and then we could analyze it and figure it out, and then watch it again. Back then, we had no ability to check. There was no pay-per-click advertising. This is before Google AdWords. So once pay-per-click came out, which was not through Google, it was Omniture was the company, or Go-To, I think is originally what the name of it was. If anybody remembers way back, all of that was done not programmatically, but you had to manually go in and adjust the prices. So I remember I had two competitors in particular, and every day, the three of us would be going to our dashboards and manually adjusting all the pricing and bidding. So Maurice would go up to $5 over my $4.90. Kyle would go up to $6, and then I'd drop down to 1 cent or something and be able to get even third place. But their CAC was so high that they didn't even realize it until they came back later that afternoon and noticed the delta. So all that was crazy times when it was all manual, it was all analog, and you just kind of guessed at what was going to work. Now it would just be so much easier to grow. I wish I had those tools. And then attribution is another one. You have no idea whether your TV, your radio, pay-per-click was easier to check. But some of the attribution technology that exists right now, it would have been much better because we just had to do some inferences on our testing. Although we did measure, it was still hard to do. I can't even imagine how we would look today versus then. But it was fun. It was definitely fun, and every day was just great. Especially when I was competing against, those were real names, Kyle and Maurice.
And are Kyle and Maurice the names of SKUs, or are those competitors?
No, those are the owners of my two competitors, Blinds Galore and Just Blinds.
So you guys were essentially manually price matching each other, is what you're saying?
Yeah, we weren't manually price matching the prices. We were manually adjusting our bids on keywords.
Oh, okay, got it. So that was purely on the marketing side.
Yeah,
that's interesting. But
we did some of that too. I remember Joe, who had a company in St. Augustine. He would look every day at what our prices were. He would put it like 5 cents below our price. And every day he would just go in there and just a nickel lower.
That's super interesting.
We'd go up higher because we let him go race to the bottom. We're gonna provide value. He wasn't providing value. We ended up actually buying his company. We ended up buying Kyle's company too. That was great.
Fascinating. All right, no more race to the bottom when you just buy all your competitors.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, so on the marketing side, there's a tremendous amount of technology and data available now versus then. On the pricing side, price elasticity with cross retailer views, cross brand views, that's, Datavations bread and butter. Curious on the assortment side of things, figuring out what's the right product for the right market. What kind of methodologies did you used to use? And if you had access to more modern technology today, how would you approach that differently?
Well, for us, the market was the whole United States. And eventually we had blinds.ca in Canada as well. So we didn't look at markets that were regional. It was really more about product assortment and price. Those are the key things. Like, were we selling a particular type of product, and were we selling the attachments to those products? And price had to do something with that.
If you had the visibility into your competitors, I guess let's pick one of your categories. You want to do blinds or
wood blinds.
Wood blinds. Let's pick wood blinds. So within wood blinds, if you had visibility into the data of your competitor as it relates to either assortment or price, what are some of the first questions you would ask around wood blinds?
Well, I want to know what is their percentage. What percentage of their sales is wood blinds versus metal blinds versus plastic blinds versus vertical blinds, and want to know what our percentage is and see how we're matching up. It's basically indexing yourself against the other, indexing your growth rate against the other. Are they surging somewhere? Are we declining somewhere? And I want to know that early. I don't want to know that after the fact, where I look at the end of the quarter and go, what happened? How did we lose share? And when we got to be part of Home Depot, there were way more analytical market share reports that we would get privy to. So that was really encouraging, because we were still doing this insightful work, and then we were getting validated by having third-party reports showing that we were gaining share basically everywhere. And that was, of course, when you get sold to a big company, results are number one. Profit, hitting plan, priority. So and market share. And if we're gaining market share, that looks good, and that helps us continue with our autonomy and our ability to grow the way we would like to, even being part of a giant monolithic company.
I love that.
Kind of fun. The thing about Home Depot, though, I mean, they're about operational excellence and efficiency. And we were looking at our information every month. Of course, navigation, we're looking at daily throughout the day. But a lot of the information that we were looking at was just monthly. And we would look at some trends each week. Boy, at Home Depot, you got to look at it every day. And you're having to then project out where you're going to be by the end of the month, even 2 weeks later. And we were going into these reports, and we're going, what? You want to know precisely where we're going to be in 2 weeks, in 3 weeks? And so now, if we're not going to make it, we've got to take action today so that we hit our number. One of the reasons Home Depot does so well as a stock is it hits its numbers. And it's because they are so attentive to the numbers, so attentive to data, and making predictions and projections and taking action in advance, not looking at the numbers and going, what just happened? When you're working with big companies, no surprises. That's number one. Of course, that's good strategy for working with anyone, especially like a spouse, with your boss. That's it. You want consistency and no surprises. And that's what you had to do within Home Depot, is to look at the numbers, anticipate where your numbers are going to be, and take action now, and have a plan, so that when you present, you're already saying, hey, we know our numbers are going to be a little soft here. And these are the steps that we're taking now to do it. If you go into those meetings and not already know and not already have a plan, you're going to be looked at poorly. You're going to get what we called a lot of advice. And you don't want to get a lot of advice. You want to know that these are questions that you really should have asked yourself. And having that data, and having the data quickly and available and accurate data that was actionable and that you knew you could rely on it. Well, that's what we did. And that was one thing that I learned at Home Depot, that you think, well, it's a big ship. It's hard to steer it. It's hard to make turns. They were making turns like, millions of turns all the time because they were so keenly focused on not only where they were, but where things looked like they were going, and took action to make sure it went in the right direction. I was actually startled by that. We all were shaken. We're like, what? You want us to change something so in 2 weeks it'll be different? Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. You'd think that, you sell to a bigger company that they'd be potentially moving slower than a slightly more entrepreneurial new company. Would you attribute this as one of the big surprises you had when you got acquired by Home Depot, just how data driven they were?
Yeah, absolutely. We thought we were data driven. They were insane.
I love that. That's so great. No, I mean, the achievement to sell and be a part of such a impressive organization is phenomenal. And, a part of what Datavations does is help prepare for conversations with Home Depot and be data driven. But I'm curious, outside of that topic, what else was really interesting that you learned when you sold to Home Depot and became part of that culture, that ecosystem?
What did I learn? Well, that opens up a lot of questions. Let's see where I can steer this conversation. I learned that in order to succeed, one, and I mentioned this earlier, you've got to hit your numbers. That's table stakes. So hit your numbers, absolutely. If not, you're in trouble. If you are down 1 basis point, 1 BIP below plan, you have underperformed. If you're 5 points above plan, you're even. You get no slack. It's you hit your number. So I was surprised by that, but I learned that that was table stakes. I also learned that in order to get capital, you had to really make compelling cases, and you had to really justify it. And again, you had to have really good information to say, this is how much money I need. I need 5 million, I need 10 million, 20 million, whatever it is. And this is what we're planning on doing with it, and having a really good plan that's thought out. So I didn't realize how good we needed to be in justifying capital. And the better we were, and then if you hit your numbers, you get the privilege of more capital. So that's sort of a game within big companies that you better learn how to play that and play it well. So that was something I learned. I learned also that a lot of the decisions within big companies are personality driven. And the only way you get good connections with people is to not selling them, but to understanding what their needs are and to asking what their objectives are so that you can be part of their solution and help them get what they want. And again, not having surprises. So knowing the data that they needed, knowing what their goals were, and showing how you could be a part of that is excellent. And I think when people go into line reviews, knowing what Home Depot's numbers are and knowing where they're weak and being able to show them. I mean, who doesn't want to be told, hey, here's an opportunity for you? Because look, when you're in business, the hardest thing is not knowing what you don't know. Not knowing something is much worse because there's nothing you can do about it. It's not identified. So if you have information that Home Depot doesn't have, and I just told you how great their data is, then you're showing them something and they're going to listen, and you're going to actually stand out from the crowd, from those people who are just asking for a sale, when you can prove that this is something they need.
No, that's fascinating. I think that, would you say that it holds true for both internally and for brand servicing and supplier servicing Home Depot as well?
Yeah, I was actually kind of conflating the two when I was talking and didn't mean to, but realized it is the internal and as brands doing the same thing. Yeah, you have to do that. So, I mean, selling is not telling people what you have and trying to convince them they need it, but understanding what they need and showing that you can provide it. And that's what you do internally to gain favor and gain credibility. And of course, trust. If they trust that you are really thinking about them and thinking about how they can improve along with you. I mean, they're not stupid. They know that you're trying to succeed too, but if you can help them, that's what you want. And I think that's having the information and asking questions about what their needs are, what their goals are, what their objectives are, the timing of all those things, the people that they need, the pricing, the margins that they're expecting, everything. All that info, the more you get, the more knowledge you have about what other people need, the better you can do.
Yeah, I love this. And you know what? It ties back really neatly to what we were talking about earlier related to the wood blind example that you shared, right? The way that at Datavations we like to think about things is you want to answer the what, which in your scenario that you were talking about earlier is like a market share shift, right? But then you also need to answer the why and the how. And that could be indexing higher or lower on your product mix as it relates to wood blinds versus steel blinds versus other kinds of blinds, right? So in a scenario where you speak with a Home Depot, you can identify that they're losing share, for example. And that's the what's happening. But really what becomes super interesting is when you can also answer the why and have a prescriptive solution to that merchant or retailer. So in your scenario, maybe purely hypothetical, Home Depot is losing a couple of points of share to its competitors, and you have the ability to look at their competitors are higher indexed on wood blinds, and therefore make a compelling argument and propose a data-driven assortment solution to say, hey, I have a couple of SKUs that are not on shelf or not online today that we might want to introduce to close that assortment gap. And I think that that's a pretty interesting segue. I would love to get your opinion and share with the audience how you would interpret some of Datavations data. So I know you're familiar with Jay, but maybe not the audience. We have a program where we're trying to democratize data to give just table stakes insight to any manufacturer in the market in order to understand both the what, but also start to understand the why. So I'm going to share with you a Datavations pulse, which is allowing you to have a merchant pulse on what's happening in the market. And I would love to hear your perspective on how this very simple table stakes data would enable you to interpret what's happening specifically in this category. The category is hose timers, and we can see across two retailers, one retailer here and one retailer here, how the brand that services both retailers plays across the retailers, but then also benchmarks against the rest of the category in that retailer. So looking at this data here, a couple of key KPIs. Question number one is, what does this tell you about this brand and the two retailers? And then eventually I want to hear what else would you like to see in this report?
Well, the first thing, there's a lot here. So the first thing that popped up is just market share. When you've got a 9% share in one retailer and only a 4.2, you got to figure out why. Are you not getting enough square footage? Is there some promotion going on? You got to dig into that. I mean, more than double the share. That's not acceptable. Are you only in a certain number of markets? Somebody on an end cap versus being buried in the back of the store. So I'd want to look at that. Is there turnover in this report? I don't see it. I would like to see turnover because the Home Depot was critical of not hitting turnover numbers because that was very impactful to the bottom line. So, and it would also give you indication as to what your fill rate was, and maybe an out of stock, and how much you're investing. So your merchandise, your inventory on hand. I would want to see inventory turns. I know Home Depot and Lowe's would be insisting on that. And if you had that information as a retailer and know that you could impact their turn, that would be highly, highly valuable. So I'd like to see that. Number of units on hand is going down rapidly, but on both, down 38% and then down 46%, and yet you've got lower share. So is something happening there where inventory is dwindling and that 4.2 is going to get lower because it's not being filled? I'm concerned if I was looking at that number.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
The rate
And-
is going down lower than the sales.
Do you want to walk through your read of this pulse? And again, for everyone in the audience, this is a free weekly or monthly report that you can sign up for Datavations, whether a customer or otherwise.
Yeah, for sure. So a couple of things pop out in this report. The first thing is that there's been a market share gain for this brand within Home Depot. And that's the what's happening. But then what becomes important is also answering the why and how, right? So what is the underlying reason for this market share gain? Is it price changes? Is it inventory? Is it promotions? Is it increased distribution? Are they handling themselves appropriately on the shelf? Is this flowing through the sell-in to sell-through at an appropriate rate? So by looking at distribution, we can see that they actually increased the amount of shelf space that they were allocated here. Their distribution grew by 1.6%, which is clearly a strong contributor to this market share gain. But then once you understand, okay, they've gotten more space, you also want to ask yourself the question, are they using that space efficiently? And that's where our velocity metric comes in. Or you can see that this is probably the biggest driver. This shelf space that's being leveraged by this brand is being used very efficiently. Now, you might say, okay, does that have to do with promotions as well? It turns out that the ASP, the average selling price for this brand, is pretty much flat. Not a big change in price here, especially when you look at price changes across the market, both in the other retailer and for the rest of the category in this retailer. So the root cause here is really just a little bit of increased distribution, but also using the space they have more efficiently. Now, one thing that I would want to call out, which is the last component, which is the inventory component, right? I would flag to this brand that given the recent success from a velocity standpoint, that they want to keep an eye on stockouts because they're a negative 38% units on hand is probably indicative of a increased demand. And the last thing you want to do is be out of stock, especially when you're just allocated more space in the store. So that's how I would interpret this top component and how the brand contributes and is playing relative to competitors in that channel. But then when you look down at Lowe's, the good news is that their velocity has grown to a certain degree as well, but their distribution has actually shrunk. And then from a velocity standpoint, and then Lowe's retail at the bottom here, this retailer, you can see that the overall category velocity growth, which is pretty interesting. So the mix here amongst competitive brands, there could be an argument that there is something happening where the velocity is actually lower for this brand than competitors, as also is indicated by the 116 versus the 192. And I would want to look into and ask the question, do we have the right assortment on the shelf here? Are we stocking appropriately? Do we have the right price point for these products? And ultimately try to get that velocity up in order to gain more market share in Lowe's.
That was great. I think from here, Jay, as you know, this is our free offering to the market to provide manufacturers table stakes visibility into this kind of data. If you were a manufacturer and you were having Datavations design a weekly update for you along these lines, I think you've already mentioned, inventory turn, but what does your dream pulse look like? What are the metrics you'd love to be top of mind and get into your inbox on a weekly basis?
Well, all manufacturers want to know how well they're doing, and they want to be told things that they don't already know. And that would mean not just overall market share for the company and how well you're doing as a company, but down to a SKU level, down to a store level. And if I could get this information more granular, that would give me even better information. And I believe that there's a lot of companies that provide overall trends, which are nice to have, but they're not as actionable as having something skewed. So if I had my dream, I would want this to be more detailed and more granular by store and SKU level.
Yeah, I mean that's great to hear, Jay. And yeah, for anyone listening, please don't hesitate to reach out to Datavations. We have that SKU store level granularity with attribute metrics, understanding of assortment gaps by location, pricing gaps by location, inventory shortages for your competitors by location, things like that. So, and I think that's a great segue into what my head of marketing, Alex Kahn, wants to talk about.
So you just heard Jay react to a single pulse. And here's the thing, as you know, we make money at Datavations selling this data to the market. But what we really believe is that the entire market deserves at least this baseline. Knowing your market share shouldn't simply be a big brand luxury. It really should be table stakes for anyone selling into retail. So we're democratizing it. That's the whole concept with Datavations Pulse. It's a baseline, it's free, it's in your inbox on a weekly or a monthly basis. If you scan this QR code and go to datavations.ai/pulse, the first 100 signups will be entered to win a Datavations branded Brookstone massage gun, as well as a $250 gift card to the retailer of their choice. And this free view, just like Jay said, just hits the surface. If you want to go deeper, down to the store, down to the SKU level, really granular visibility on your competitors, even a regional or a state level read, reach out to us and we can show you how much deeper our data goes. Jay, here's the first question we got in the Q&A panel. If you were coaching a brand leader today, what's the one habit or discipline you'd call non-negotiable?
Accurate data, and not just accurate, but timely, quick, actionable, timely data. You've got to have that. And if you go into any meeting, internally or externally, if you don't have that, you can't make decisions, and you don't want to guess. And I went back to something else. I'll go back to something else I said earlier. No surprises. When you are consistent in how you present and show information with no obfuscation, and it's objective facts, and you're reliable, you're a vendor that a big box is going to look to for answers and to help themselves. And that creates a lot of value.
Love that answer. Let's see what the next one we got here is. Okay, this one's about Pulse. Philip, feel free to grab this one or I'm happy to cover. I'm a small brand going up against big national players. Kind of connects to that example we just showed. If we both started using Pulse, who actually gets more out of it? Me, the ankle biter trying to enter the category, or the captain?
Well, I think that access to data is one component of what is necessary in order to really conduct what we like to call merchant enablement, ultimately enabling your customer. The other component after you access it is how you use it. And that's really oftentimes where you get a big edge and advantage against your competitors, which is, okay, now that I have this information, how do I dig deeper and actually provide an end-to-end data-driven story of how my insight combined with my offerings can help the merchant grow their category? What do you think about that?
It's a good answer. It's not about who gets it, it's how they use it, basically.
Yes.
All right, and we've got one more for Jay.
Okay.
What's something you believed about building a brand that turned out to be wrong?
I think it was all about superficial things. The logo, the colors you're using, taglines, things like that. And it's really more about what you do, how you actually perform, your behavior as a company. How quickly do you answer the phone? How good are your people at answering? Do they have the data they need to make decisions? When you can analyze your information and your processes to determine whether you are operating the way you want your brand to be, that's the way people are going to associate you. The other stuff is all superficial. It's your behavior as a company that's going to determine your brand. And that's the mistake I originally thought was more about the logo and the colors and the taglines. It's really more about how good are you and can you prove it?
Appreciate you fielding those questions on the fly. Gentlemen, this has been a great conversation. And for everyone in the audience, hope you took something valuable out of it and hope to see you on Datavations Pulse soon. Thank you both
Thanks,
for your
everyone.
time today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jay. Appreciate it. Thank you, Alex.
Thank you.